Math is the language of the universe. I'm sure you've heard that statement. Well, in this video, I'm going to offer up a perspective that might just change your view on that very statement. It might become a little less true for you. Let's see how it goes. So we know as we ground our light, compress our light, our divine light into this dimensional field, we manifest as a human being. And the human being, the avatar that we are, has a certain perspective. It has a way of experiencing reality. And that way of experiencing reality is in alignment with the dimensional field that it is aligned with or operating in. So if you are disconnected from your higher self, disconnected from source, and fully identified as the human avatar, you're going to limit your understanding of how reality functions. You're not going to know why you're here. You're not going to know that you're a multidimensional energetic being. You're going to just fully rely on your five senses, which is being or identifying as the human. Well, the term or the phrase that math is the universal language or the language of the universe arises out of that human perspective. Now, we know that frequency is what really controls everything. What frequency of energy is moving through you? What frequency is active? What frequency are you operating at? Frequency controls our reality, right? The movement or motion of atoms, what frequency are they vibrating at, creates a certain state of matter, whether it be a solid, a liquid, or a gas. So we're starting to understand that frequency plays a major role in this reality. Now, where does math work into this? So from a limited perspective, a human perspective, we're operating primarily through our five senses. So we're looking around and we're seeing things. And this universe is organized in a way that creates or allows consciousness to operate within it and manifest certain experiences. Now, from the human perspective, you may have even heard the phrase that chaos and randomness, everything is random, the universe is chaotic. That, again, is a belief that is coming from the human perspective. Quantum physics, randomness, and things of that nature. Now, we're starting to understand that things are not random. Okay, all events are entangled. They are attached. They are tied together. We are one. We are one with source. This dimensional field that we step down into, this time-space reality, this physical universe, allows us to experience aspects of ourselves in a way that makes it appear that we're separate. That's the function of this universe. That's the purpose of it. So we could come in here and we can bring our divine energy forward. It can change its frequency and manifest in different ways. So if we get back to the mathematical equations that many, Einstein and others, have come up with, we look at that in terms of a way that the human brain or the human avatar can start to understand its reality. So through mathematics, we could identify patterns. And as we identify patterns, we could gain a better understanding from the human perspective as to how things might operate. And as that understanding increases, we then add a predictive nature to it. We could start to anticipate how things are going to unfold, how experiments are going to manifest, and the results that they're going to achieve. And that happens on a consistent basis when we apply mathematical formulas to it. Now, when we take a look at that from a higher perspective, from a perspective of higher consciousness, the math really isn't the controlling factor in the situation. The math really isn't the language of the universe. The math is the way that the human being can understand the universe. When you're operating from the perspective of a human, you're operating from a bandwidth of frequency that has to manifest reality in a certain way. We have to understand that manifestation of reality in a certain way. And that way is from the perspective of the human being. So we're operating with this left brain, this logical brain. We're trying to make sense of how our universe works, not necessarily looking at it from an energetic perspective, but we're looking at it from a perspective of science. Okay. And science really tells us what theories can we bring forward, be it mathematical or physics, whatever it is, and how repeatable can they be? Okay, so we're looking for consistency. So when we look around and we see patterns in our reality, we could come up with mathematical equations that help us to define or better understand those patterns. And we see those patterns reflected throughout our manifested reality. Now, this universe is designed as such that it allows consciousness or enables consciousness to come in and filter through and drop down into this physical time-space reality and manifest in an organized way. So everything has purpose, intent behind it. It's all consciousness and it's all organized. Now, again, from the human perspective, it might appear random. And when we don't understand it and we can't tie it together with patterns or predictability, we call it random. But as we start to expand and we start to think or lean into the creation process, the manifestation of consciousness process, information starts to flow forward, which allows us to start to connect the dots. And as a human, we use it through the language of mathematical equations. That's our language. Now, there's ETs, there's other consciousness, other aspects, multidimensional beings in this reality who don't necessarily rely on mathematics. Okay, so then we really can't call it the universal language. Okay, it's maybe the universal language across humanity. Okay, but that goes without saying that we could use mathematics to understand or better understand the universe because we can define it or quantify it. And again, that is a function of experiencing this time-space reality through the human experience. Now, if we look at the higher dimensional beings, they're more operating on a frequency basis, an energetic basis, less on the equations and the mathematical formulas, okay? Because they're in a frequency where manifestation may work a little bit differently. It's more fluid, it's more coherent, okay? And from us, from the human perspective, we're more bound to a time-space reality. So we bring thoughts forward with an intent, and then we have to kind of generate the tools to be able to manifest that either by doing or by creating or inventing or understanding. That's where a lot of these mathematical equations come from. So when we're coming up with these equations like Einstein theory of relativity and things like that, that energy dropped in, that information dropped in from a higher dimensional field, and it was run through his filter, and it manifested in a way that more greatly captured an understanding of how our universe works. But that understanding is still being filtered through the human perspective so that other humans within that frequency bandwidth can grasp it and comprehend it. Okay, so when we look back at ancient Egypt and the pyramids in Lemuria and things like that, were they working with complex mathematical formulas? Well, we can look at the work that was done or how things were built, and we could gain a better understanding using mathematical formulas as to how things are structured in their relationship to other objects and things of that nature. But were the ancient Egyptians utilizing mathematics from a logical perspective, from a practical perspective, to create these amazing structures? Okay, so that's a question I throw out to you. My understanding is they were not. They had a level of consciousness that went above the language of mathematics. And even though these things were built mathematically, mathematics was not the primary driving force behind the creations. It was consciousness. They had a different understanding of the universe and how the universe works and how to create these structures. And it was more in alignment with frequency. Okay, so energetic frequency and energetic manifestation at a higher level of consciousness created results that maybe our level of consciousness is just beginning to understand how that could have happened. Okay, even though we can make sense of the structures mathematically, they were built from a higher level of consciousness. They were created from a higher level of consciousness using means that might not be available to us today. Why not? Well, it's not because we don't have the technology or we haven't invented the technology yet. It's because we have not risen to the level of consciousness to be able to grab it out of the ether and bring it forward and manifest from that perspective. So humanity could try to create these structures from more of a barbaric or physical standpoint, analyzing it using math, drawing up the schematics using math, and then using physical tools, cranes, heavy equipment, and things like that to try to manifest this, to try to create these objects. Well, it's the limitation of consciousness, not the understanding of mathematics, that really is the barrier there. Okay, so as you start to expand in consciousness, you start to gain an understanding of how our universe works from a different perspective, from a higher frequency perspective. And I don't have a background in mathematics, but I've received amazing information about gravity, the creation of the universe, quantum effects, and things like that. So it's not the education per se. A lot of times the education keeps you limited to operating from a programmed state of being, okay? What humanity is going through now is an ascension, an expansion of consciousness. Just like Nikola Tesla, information dropped in and he was able to create amazing new inventions, and these things advanced humanity. So it's not so much in terms of trying to understand how this stuff works or take a mathematical approach to it and squeeze it all into a little box. This formula, this equation explains everything. Well, the equation really helps the human to understand the environment, okay? And then things could be built out of that equation. And then consciousness might start to expand and that equation changes, or something in the reality shifts because a new frequency version of reality opens up, where maybe the reality that once fit neatly into that little box no longer fits, right? So those equations might have worked from a certain bandwidth of consciousness, but as reality expands, frequency rises, consciousness expands, those formulas or equations no longer work. Okay, so we can continue down that path of trying to take our reality and shrink it into a form where we can understand and use mathematics to do that. Or we could shift focus and start to look in terms of frequency, do the healing work, and start to be able to open up to the very levels of frequency, the very levels of consciousness that the ancient humans had access to. And that not only includes different means or ways of creating these amazing structures, but it also means stepping into a reality where you have access to multidimensional beings, where higher consciousness can flow, an exchange of information can be transferred seamlessly, because we're no longer cut off from what is now really still unseen for a large part. Okay, does that make sense? So in terms of the language of the universe, really, you could say the language of the universe is consciousness. And consciousness manifests here in this reality through varying degrees of frequency. Everything that you experience in your reality is a reflection of you. You are conscious. Everything in the reality is consciousness. Okay, but it's manifesting in different frequencies. Not only in terms of physical structures, physical objects, the screen you're watching this on, whether it be a phone, a computer, chair you're sitting in, whatever it is, but just the reality in general. Okay, it's all consciousness. And as we can shift our frequency and do the energy healing work and alchemize the density within the body, we open up to new ideas, new thoughts, and new ways of perceiving them. So instead of fitting it into a tiny little box that maybe you were programmed to utilize that served you well when you were more cut off from who you truly are, more cut off of your higher self, your multidimensional energy. You can now cast that box aside as it no longer serves you. You are reaching up that antenna into higher dimensional fields and accessing energy, remembering, knowing is now flowing through you, and you're able to perceive it from a new lens, a lens that is less tied to the human experience and more tied to the multidimensional experience. And the understanding of how our reality works and fits together and interacts with each other starts to become more clear. Hope this video resonated with you guys. If you have not downloaded my heart chakra meditation, definitely do that. There's a link in the description, and I will see you next time. Thank you.